Hello, friends. How are you all doing? I'm so excited to be here to welcome you all to this fun-filled, learning-filled weekend that we're going to have as part of a month-long hackathon. If you've not really figured out what this is about, we are hosting a month-long hackathon in December where there's tons of winning opportunities for you. And before we really get to the end of the submissions deadline, we wanted to make sure that we are able to empower you with these streams wherein you get to ask questions, you get to learn from experts who know it all about the tools and technologies that you're going to work on. So to kick this off, we are going to start with a Kintone workshop, and we have a friend who's waiting backstage who I'm going to call in just a second. I'm going to scroll through all of the chat here to kind of feel the vibe that you all are giving out in the chat. And I can already see all of you joining. Hi, hello, thank you so much for joining. And I know it's also a festive time. So if you have any interesting ideas that you have in mind that you're going to do during this weekend, anything Christmassy that you've planned that you want to share with us, please feel free to do that as well. We really want to have a lot of fun here. Also, while we're going to learn a lot about Kintone. And while you're doing that, I'm going to quickly call on Sean to get on stage and maybe start with a few introductions. Hey, Sean, how are you doing?
I said thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone. How's it going?
It's going really well. I was waiting to see all the Christmas-like things that people are going to do this weekend, and I'm really excited to know that people are really excited for this session. If you are
Yeah.
looking at, we already have questions saying what is Kintone, and that's
Oh boy.
exactly what Sean is here going to
I'm
tell us
here.
about.
I'm here to shill Kintone to you. Uh, I'm just kidding. I work for a company that we have a product called Kintone that we'll be using in a project today. But I do want to stress that during the course of this workshop, the concepts that we're going to be going over today, coding in JavaScript, running a backend, making API calls, those are universal. I always try to keep things broadly applicable for today. We'll be using Kintone as a free web database, and you're free to use it for free because it is free, 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 free. But you don't have to. Yeah.
That sounds amazing. There's definitely so much waiting for you all to learn. Sean, if you're ready, let's get your screen up, and then I'll leave it up to you and be backstage to help you if you want any.
Yeah, sure. All right. So I'm going to start sharing some screens, and then we'll get started because we only have an hour today, and we've got a lot to go over about how to make some API calls and learn how to run a backend, what are cores, errors, and all kinds of stuff. All right. So hopefully everyone can see my screen all right. And what we're going to be working on today is this. I have a GIF here of the demo app. We have a app. It's made in React. It uses Express as a backend, and it uses a web database. This time uses Kintone because I like Kintone. And if you look at this GIF right here, it's you can pick your country, you can pick your state, you can pick a city from these drop downs, and then you click the submit button and it saves it to a database, right? Extremely common, pattern for gathering any kind of information, right? It doesn't have to be country, city, or state, but I thought it was a good example and a fun one to do, right? And then we also have a get button as well where you can get that information, and then maybe in your app you can get people's location and display it on a map, for example, or you can run some analytics on user data and stuff like that as well, right? I leave it up to you. Today we're just going to be building out from this front end made in React. We are going to be working on the back end, like how to take data from a React front end and save it into a web database, right? So if that sounds good to everybody, I'm gonna get started. I do have the chat open. I think I can see Twitch chat. So for example, if I see is Hubham real? Hi there, ethical cod. I see your comment as well. And so like if you have comments for a streamer, I like looking in the chat. I like talking to people. So if you want to say something or ask a question or I don't know, ask me what my favorite food is. That's fine too. It's whatever, right? I like to have fun. So yeah, does that sound good to everybody? We good to go? Yeah, I think so. I don't know. I'm just gonna keep going anyways, just in case. Like you guys might be like, it's from what I understand. There's people from all over the world right now attending this, and so you might be waking up, or you might be like eating chicken or something. It's yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. Is Subham, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. See, if you make a comment, then streamer will say your name live on stream. Isn't that cool? Yeah. All right. So the first thing that we're going to do, so we're going to be doing some web dev, right? And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to clone the starter project. So MLH has put the link to the GitHub repo in the chat. And whether you use GitHub desktop or use the terminal, however you like to clone a repository, go ahead and get a copy of our starter project. So you're going to go here to the code button, click on that, and then I am going to go over to a terminal here and GitHub repo clone Kintone workshops REST React and REST API workshop, and you should see it. Clone. Oops, looks like I should update my GitHub client. Not today, GitHub. Not gonna happen. And then we're going to change directories into that new GitHub repository and open up the code in your favorite code editor. I'm gonna put that over here. If you want to know what theme I'm using for VS Code, everybody always wants to know. I am using Shades of Purple. It's the best theme. And we have a question, ethical code. So how's Kintone is different from GitHub? So completely different. We'll go into the Kintone. I promise I won't spend too much time on like what it is. I like to show what it is, but GitHub is for managing your code. Kintone is basically like a web database. So as you're learning programming, right, as you're starting to get into the programming world or as you get more experience, right, there's all kinds of different database technologies. And as you do like tutorials and stuff, right, you'll see like Firebase from Google, right, which is really, really good. Supabase, which is like an open source version. Those are web databases. Kintone is also a web database, basically, as opposed to a local database, right? Like, and when I was first doing programming tutorials, because I'm self-taught as well, it was like a MySQL database. You'd like run it locally, right? And then I was doing like Ruby on Rails, for example, similar to MongoDB. Yeah, it is a SQL database, if you know what that is. So it is not a unlinked database like MongoDB. Although I think for most people, you probably don't need to differentiate between a unlinked database and a SQL database, right? Like for most use cases, until you get up there to like Facebook levels of users, right? Usually you probably could just use a regular old SQL database. But maybe your app makes it big. You never know. All right. So now that we have our code open here, you can actually go into the terminal, and this is a React project. You can run npm install. You always want to install your dependencies, right? And if you're just getting started with like web dev and you're kind of like, I don't know what to do all the time, how does this person know what to do? Usually you want to look in your code and look in these files. And if you see like a package.json or like a yarn lock theme, you think, okay, I need to like install some dependencies, right? These are extra packages that I use to make my life easier, right? That's the whole point of using React, is that it's the most popular framework. There's packages for everything. Like I don't want to code out a loading spinner, right? Because we have a little loading spinner in our app today. I don't, just install it and be done with it, right? That's the fun part of React, right? You don't have to do everything yourself. But if you scroll down in the package.json, you can actually see this part called scripts, and that'll tell you like what kind of ways you can start your project or what you can do with your project, right? A lot of people write them in the scripts. So you can have like, for example, here we have start and build. So one obviously like probably like builds out and packages, bundles all your JavaScript together, and the other one just runs like a local server. So we're gonna do npm run start, and let's start up our project and see what we have. All right. So ethical code for heavy databases, SQL, relational databases, professional heavy databases, large databases. It really comes down to, and this is stuff that actual data scientists who have their like master degrees, right, and like these kinds of things talk about. But it really comes down to how you structure your data. You know, if you have like these kind of like loosely linked ideas of data, then you could get away with a non-relational database, of course, and sometimes that might be faster. It's a little bit out of my wheelhouse to say like, oh, you should use a SQL database for this, or you shouldn't for that. Unfortunately, I am confident saying that for most use cases, an SQL database is just fine. You know, but if you feel more comfortable using MongoDB, like go for it. The best thing about web development, in my opinion, is how fast you can go, right? And so, whatever you feel comfortable using, is always best. All right, so we're going to keep going here. I ran npm run start in the terminal, and you can see that we have our starter project, and it's just some React packages. I literally installed a package called you know city, country, state, and it gave me a list of all these cities, countries, and states. And I also installed a package called like React like Smart Picker, something like that. You can check that out in package.json if you want. That lets me have these scrollable pickers. You can see that I did not install a React package for the buttons down here, as they are ugly basic HTML buttons. But you get the point, right? One says submit, it's going to submit our data. The other says get, it's going to get data. If you want to make them fancy, go for it. You can practice your CSS if you want to, I guess, right? And so actually, if we pick a city, country, state right now, I don't know, Algeria, sure. Algiers, sure. It's going to spin and it's going to fail because our code is not finished yet, right? This is an unfinished code base. So we are actually going to kind of fill out this code together. And first, I'm going to kind of go through the repository a little bit and talk about how it's set up. And this is kind of oriented towards kind of more beginner coders, in that we have a large thing that we need to actually include and set up in our code base. We have React running, we have our front end running, but we want to save something into a database, right? This time it's Kintone, but we want to save some data into a database. You need a backend. And a lot of times, especially when I was first starting out, not only with like React, but other frameworks like Svelte, for example, big fan of Svelte. I'd be trying to make API calls from the front end, and I'd always get like these error messages about cores, right? Have any of you ever heard of what a cores error is? Um, I mean, if you Google it, you can get people that actually, know a lot more than I do about it. But basically, it's a security protocol, right, for making sure that this web request actually came from this source and is going to this place, right? And if this didn't exist, you could have, for example, someone pretending to be google.com and making a web request right into your browser, and that's not good, right? So it's a security thing. And as you develop and do web development, you'll run into CORS errors quite often, actually. And it's kind of a pain in the butt. And I wish that it didn't exist sometimes, but it does. And the way that you get around that when doing web development and making REST API calls to services is you make your API calls from a dedicated backend that handles that for you. And this time we're going to be using Express. So Express, we just type in Express backend. It is a Node.js web application, minimalist web framework for making a backend, right? And your backend here is going to have some routes, for example. So like localhost 50,000 / get data, localhost 50,000 / save data, whatever you want to call your route. And you're going to send an API request first from React to your backend. Then your backend say, okay, what do you want to do? And you're going to say, hey, I want to save this data. And your backend says, okay, give me the data. And it's going to pass that data, manage it. Maybe like you edit a little bit in your backend, right? That's what backends are for. That's for handling data, manipulating data, right? Front end should only be for showing data. And then the backend then is going to make its own web REST API request to your database. And it's going to say, hey, database, I have this nice, neatly packaged data. I want you to save it. And it's going to say, okay, backend, that's your job. You're let in. And so that's kind of what we're going to be doing today. Is we're going to be basically coding out this Express backend in order to make our front end work, right? If I'm moving too fast, then please let me know. But you can also, of course, as I hear, watch the recording and scroll back. And I always found that when I was studying coding, the big game changer for me was watching tutorials and like workshops like this twice. And the first time is just watch. And I know it like takes forever, especially like the 3 hour like React master course, right? You don't want to watch it twice, but watch the first time, and then the second time code along. And I found that that was like what really changed it and helped me like really learn programming. So maybe if I'm going too fast, then try that out. All right. So we have Express here. I kind of talked about what that is. Express is a very, very, common minimal backend for web projects. Usually it's all you need actually, which is kind of cool. And so then we're going to be coding out a backend in Express, and that is its own Node.js server. So you see here how we have React running on localhost 3000. Actually, we're going to be opening up another terminal or another tab in the terminal. I'm a tabs guy, so I'm going to open up another tab. And we are actually going to be running another Node.js server. So we have our React here still running, localhost 3000. Now I want you to change directories into the backend folder. And here's where I've kind of prepared what we're going to be working on today. And you will see actually another package.json, and you will see another file called server.js. And so whenever you see a package.json, first thing that you do is npm install, right? So npm install. It's going to get all of our package, moderate severity vulnerabilities. You can fix those. It's fine. They're just moderate, right? And then if you actually, in the code base, if you go into the backend folder, you can see in our package.json that here also we have npm run test, which we don't actually have any tests ready. That's out of the scope of this workshop today. But we also have npm run start, which starts up our server.js. So what is server.js? This is going to be where our backend and our routing and everything happens, right? And we're going to be connecting this to a web database. And so here's where I'm going to talk about what Kintone is. And I think that by the end of this, you'll understand like why it's a really good choice for fast development, and especially for like hackathons and stuff like that. So here I'm on my own personal Kintone subdomain, right? That's sean.kintone.com. And I have here a bunch of apps because I make stuff all the time. And I actually use Kintone in my own personal coding projects that I do outside of work. I actually, I'm not, there's no one with like a gun to my head right now. I like the product. I think that it's really, really easy to develop with. And I've made like databases and like run them locally. I've run like web databases. I've used Firebase and stuff like that. And I think that Kintone is just really, really fast. It is not as fully featured as large application suites such as like AWS, for example, or Firebase, which has like authentication, right? And like user data targeting services and stuff like that. This is literally just a backend where you can save some data, you can get some data. 90% of the time, that's all you need. And so what you can do here is we have an app, and we're going to do this together actually in a little bit. But like I could, for example, make a database right here. So we're going to call it where are you, right? Because that's what our app is about: people, city, country, and state. And my database is going to have 3 string columns. So I do click and drag 1, 2, 3, and column number 1 is going to be called country, and I give it a field code. We'll talk about what that is later, country, so I can reference it in my code. Boom. State. Oh, you're going to love what I have to say about that one, ethical code. Let me tell you. You get 25 gigabytes for free, and that is just the global limit. We don't actually have a freemium version. What you're getting is the full version, and it is free as in like we don't even ask for a credit card. And it is free as in freedom as well, in that like we don't like sell your data to third parties or do anything like that. Yeah, it's actually free. So here we go. I have country, state, city. These are text fields. So this is a type safe database. If you want to be fancy, right? No one's going to put integers or booleans right into these. They're going to be typecast to string all the time. I click on save form. I click on activate app. And even while I was talking, I still managed to make a type safe database within like 2 minutes or something like that. So I can manually enter, right? If I want to be a dumb and do that, I can manually edit my database. So I used to live in Dallas, Texas. So there you go. Bada bing, bada boom, right? I have a database that has 3 string columns. Isn't that great, right? And so that is what Kintone does for you. It allows you to basically set up a database real fast. And I've done this with Firebase as well, and it's faster than Firebase, which is kind of nice, right? All right, so how can you get Kintone? We have a link for everybody, and yeah. Oh, we're going to go through making the database as well. Thank you very much, Sid. If you go to kintone.dev/new, here's our developer website, has like API information. And yeah, if you go to kintone.dev/new, or you can go to this developer license registration form, you have here a privacy agreement, blah, 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 blah. You can read it if you want, but basically it says like, hey, you get 5 users in your own personal subdomain. So that's my personal subdomain is sean.kintone.com, right? So you can make like users for your stuff that can log in stuff. Maybe like you have a hackathon going, you have a team of 5 people. That's great. And you can store 25 gigabytes. So if you're storing like video and stuff like that, it's going to fill up fast. But for actual like coding, storing strings, right? That's millions of records in your database, right? It's going to be okay. And if you don't use it for 3 months, then we might delete it, but probably not. And that's about it. Don't spam API calls, right? That's all. You can put in a name. We have no way of checking if it's your real name, so do what you want. But you do need to put an email. And the reason why you need to put an email is because we don't want people to spam creating free databases. That's all. You'd have to make another email if you want another database. Okay. So put in your email, and it does have to be valid because we'll send like activation link, and your login name will be that email. And if you give us some more information, I say us, like we're a small team. Kintone is a Japanese product. I live in Japan. I'm from Japan. So it's really nice over here. It's kind of cold though. And we're a fairly large company in Japan, but just starting to like kind of peek our head out of Japan and see if people are interested in our platform abroad as well. So yeah, support Japan. Okay. And if you give us some information, and by us I mean literally like me and like the 3 other guys who are doing this, guys and 2 girls, then we actually do read these. So yeah, if you want us to like check out and do some stuff, then please tell us. The last part down here is this Kintone developer license subdomain. So remember how my subdomain where I just made my database in like 2 seconds was sean.kintone.com right up here, right? That's that part. So if you put in Sean, you'll see that it's already taken, right? sean.kintone.com, that's mine. You should get yours. You can put whatever you want. I code for MLH, and that'll be like I code for MLH .kintone.com, but you have to do it in lowercase. Sorry. There you go. And agree to that stuff, and there you go. You have a fully featured web database platform, and it's yours to use as long as you don't like spam with it, right? It's a pretty good deal in my opinion. Yeah. Once you get your activation email, you click on that. It'll ask you to like make a password, and then it'll kick you out to this login screen right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and log in one more time. And that's how you're gonna get your database run today. Today's project, you can use another database if you're more comfortable with that. It's totally doable. You'd have to change the API requests, right? Because we're targeting our fetch requests to Kintone, but you can easily change that to Firebase, Supabase, MongoDB, anything that you want to use if you're more comfortable with that. So don't worry about that. That being said, you just saw me make the database in like 2 seconds. So I hope you understand how how like overpowered this is for hackathons, right? And so just to do it one more time because people didn't actually have it, and I know that I'm going a little bit fast, but we only have 1 hour today. If you want to make a new database, you're going to click on this plus sign up here on the top right, apps. And today we're just going to be creating an app from scratch. And you drag and drop the fields that you want to have in your database right here. Thank you, Ethical Cod. I honestly do believe that. Like I legitimately like the products that I work with, which is nice. You know, not everyone like gets to work with something that they actually enjoy, right? I think it's good. Like I use it for a personal e-commerce website that I run, and another website that I run for a friend as a backend, and it's great. You know, so once you have your fields up here, your three text fields, the really important thing that you need to do is you can change their name, and your name is just for your own reference, but you need to scroll down in the settings to field code, right? Computers are kind of dumb. They don't know the difference between, uppercase C country and lowercase c country, right? They think it's different things, for example, right? So in the field code, this is what you're going to refer to in your code in order to get this data. So later on, when people enter in their country, right, US, UK, India, wherever you are, um, you need to reference this field code. This is going to be the country field code. So you're going to do lowercase c country, okay, and click save, and do the same thing for the other um, fields as well. So we have state up here, field code lowercase s, state, and the last one, text, city. So the name can be uppercase. See, it is like a variable name. Very good. We call it a field code because we try and keep things like non-programming. You'll notice everything here is drag and drop. But yeah. And then the last thing that you need to do is click on Activate App, and that'll activate your new database, and it's ready to go, right? Then next thing that we're going to do is we're going to make a API token, right? And so if you've ever done this by hand in other frameworks, like I used to work with PHP a lot, and like making an API token authenticated route, it took time, right? It's very very easy with web databases. Firebase is also very very easy. I've done comparisons too. This part, they're pretty much the same. But what you need to do is you need to click on the cogwheel up here in your app, and it's going to take you to like back to editing the database. So you can like add fields, you can add columns if you want to, right? Go to app settings, scroll down to API token. Okay, it seems like that's where it might be. And you're just going to click on generate. And here's my super secret API token, so I will be changing this later, so don't worry about that. And what you're going to do is you can add a scope or a scoped permissions to your API token very, very easily. This is one part where, Kintone also makes it very, very easy to develop fast, right? We only want people to be able to add records, right? We don't want people who have this token to be able to delete, stuff out of our database, right? So we're just going to click add records and view records, right? Click on save, click on update app, and in less than 5 minutes, you have a type safe database, right? Because only strings can go in here. It is API token authenticated. People can't just get in and do whatever they want. And also it's scoped permissions as well. And so if you were at like a coding interview trying to get like your first coding job and you're like, yes, this project has scoped API token permissions, I'd be like, oh man, this person really knows what they're talking about, right? um, so that's definitely a little bit of knowledge and something to consider for future projects as well. All right. So we have here our app, and now I'm going to actually just re-add in some information because I didn't do that before. So I'm going to do United States, and we'll do Texas, Dallas. Sure. One more time. Okay. So now that we have our database created, right, we still haven't told our code where our database is and like our super secret API token, right? Because you always have to have your code know about your database, right? And so what you're going to do here is we're going to do it in a very, very standard way. If you go to the code and in the root folder, you're going to see a .env.example file, right? .env.example. And this is a practice that I really like to see, especially when I'm interviewing junior devs, right? Because sometimes they'll hand me their GitHub. Okay, cool, all kinds of projects in there. What do I do with them? Or like, how do I start them up, right? And a .env.example file will kind of tell people like, hey, you need this information in order to run this product. But obviously they haven't uploaded their real .env file, which has like super secret passwords and API tokens and stuff in there, right? You don't want to do that. So that's why we have a .env.example file right here. And what you're going to do is you're going to copy and paste that, make another one, basically another copy of it, and then rename it to just .env. This is very, very standard web dev practice, right? You don't want to upload your .env with all your super secret passwords up to GitHub, right? Because then I'll steal them and I'll run up a bunch of charges on your credit card, right? Um, once you have your .env file, then we need 3 pieces of information. And this is going to be what tells our code about our database, right? So the first thing that we're going to do is our subdomain. And for Kintone, and this is Kintone specific as well. For Firebase, you might just need your like Firebase app name, and you might need like a Firebase token or something like that. For Kintone, it's subdomain, app ID, aka what database you're trying to save to or post to, and then API token, right? Yeah, dot is used for hidden files. Yeah, very good, actually. Yes, it's usually a hidden file because people don't need to know about it. Well, it's not technically hidden, right? It's just hidden from view. So I'm going to take my URL from this app that we have right here and copy it and paste it just real quick into the .env file. And this is how you get the information for your app right here, right? So here we have sean.kintone.com. Remember, it said subdomain. So for my subdomain is going to be Sean. Just keep quotes. And then the app ID, which database are we trying to save to? I've made a lot of apps over my years here and my personal projects. This is going to be database number 98 for me. And the way you can tell that is right after this K right here. This is going to be app number 98. And then the last thing is our API token, which we just made, but I foolishly forgot to copy and paste. So I'm going to go back into the settings, app settings, API token. There's my API token. Thank you. Click save just in case. Click update just in case, even though nothing changed. And then I'm going to copy and paste my API token in there. Oopsie daisy. Yeah, Alexi, hey, welcome. Yeah, I'm happy that people are here, or even if you're watching in the future as well. I'm always happy when people are here learning to code, do stuff like that. We're just going over our .env file and connecting this to our database. And actually, we just finished, right? Now we have our subdomain, our app ID, and our API token. And so if you go into server.js, we'll go through the code in detail in just a little bit, but basically we are using process.env, and then we're getting our subdomain, app ID, and API token in our server.js. So our backend has access to our API token, not our front end, right? Which is very, very good coding practice, right? You want your super secret stuff to be in your backend that you control. Your front end, you don't want your API token to be on there because people can open up developer tools and find your API token, even if you thought it was secret. In your backend that you control, it's safe just for you most of the time. So that's also very good, right? And here we have our subdomain, API, and API token. Okay, very, very good. Since we're limited on time, I'm going to start coding out our backend.js. And this is the part where we start to code along after I kind of go through the file once, right? And what we're going to be doing here is just exclusive to Express.js. Has nothing to do with Kintone or any other product. If you choose to use Express for future hackathon projects, it is a fast way to make a backend, right? Just like Kintone is a fast way to make a database. I like using Express, but if you're using other choices, so for example, the most popular backend for React is Next, right? Next.js. And that's what a lot of the time people use. Next is very, very powerful and popular for a reason. It's very, very well done. It is a little bit overkill for most use cases, but you could use Next.js to make your routes if you want to do that. If you're using Svelte, which I am always a big fan of Svelte Kit, for example, is Svelte Kit actually has this backend all built into it in one, so you don't have to like separately install Express or Next or anything like that, which is kind of cool, right? All right. So yeah, what is cores used for? Good question, and that's actually what we're going to be talking about as we go through the code, because we need to make a allow list for our cores to basically say like, hey, any web requests coming from this origin, trust them and let them do XYZ, right? And that's the whole reason why we have a backend in the first place, right? Because like if I were to go into the React portion of this project in the source folder, like app.js, and I was like, okay, let make API call is a function where I do let response equal fetch www.myapi.com/get data, right? I like making a fetch request like this. This is usually going to fail, especially for any major service. And that is because they don't let you make web requests from front-end frameworks. And if you were to go back to like, if I were to go into, I don't know, Google, I guess. So here I'm on the Google front page. And I would open up my like developer tools and stuff like that, right? So like here in this JavaScript console, like, you know, I could be like fetch, you know, and then I could go to like google.com/admin. This obviously does not exist, but you get the idea, right? Slash data. And then I could like take that data and blah, 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 right? And so like Google is gonna be like, yeah, no, first, well, obviously it doesn't exist, but this is a front end web console, right? And so like you don't want people to be able, even though they're viewing your web pages, they're in your app, right? You don't want people to be able to make any web request that they want to, right? That's not a very secure thing. And so CORS, or cross origin resource sharing, right? Different origins sharing resources in the name, is a way of protecting against that. And any major service, like I said, like Firebase or anything, will have you make web requests from the backend, right? How does CORS make this authentication? It's built into browsers, actually, these days. So if you want the real nitty gritty about CORS, you know, it takes a long time to explain. Definitely look it up yourself, and people much smarter than I will explain it in much better detail than I could. You know, it's not exactly my area of expertise. I just know what I need to do to get around it, which is use a backend, like Express, for example. All right. So enough about that. We're going to now go through our server.js, and we're going to code it out together, and hopefully everything runs the first time, and you will have a working front end and back end connected to a type-safe database within 1 hour, which is pretty good. And you can easily build off of this pattern for your future hackathon projects, in my opinion. So to go over the code real quick, we have our imports at the top, right? If you'll notice, these are not ES6 imports. These are just old JavaScript require imports. You can update them if you want to. We're requiring Express, right? We've installed that package. We have the cores package, which is going to manage those cores errors to say like, hey, allow localhost 3000 React to come on through. I have a variable for port because our app is going to be running on port 50,000. And then the Express class that I initiated right here is just called app. I just called app. You can call it whatever you want. And we have .m. So this is getting our .env files from our .env right here. And we called them subdomain, app ID, and API token. Okay, cool. And our app is going to be using, or our Express app, right? So from now on, when I say app, I'm talking about our Express class, is going to be using JSON, right? Because usually when you're doing API requests, right, you want to be handling JSON, parsing JSON, right? And also, this is a Express thing. They want you to designate cores, say app.use cores, and then you have this cores options part right here, right? And this is going to allow localhost 3000 to make requests to our backend, right? And that's what this is all about. You want to only allow your React, which is, if you go back to the terminal, if you go to our other running terminal, you can see this is running a localhost 3000, right? So you want to allow people from in here, and it's not going to allow other requests to come into your backend. And then your backend is allowed to make requests to wherever it wants to, right? That's what Express or SvelteKit or Next.js does. So like from your backend, you can make requests to save data to your Kintone database or your Firebase database or your Azure database if you want to, right? That's what that is for. I have some endpoints already typed up for us, our multiple records endpoint and our single record endpoint. So this part is Kintone specific, right? Because we are getting data from our Kintone database and we're saving data to our Kintone database, right? So I got these from our documentation, which you can always check out, kintone.dev. Literally all I did was scroll down API docs, And this is how you get and save information from our database, right? If you go to, I have the screen zoomed in. Here we go. If you go to records, you want to, get some records from your database, right? I want to get everybody's country, city, and state. So I'm going to be using this one, right? Subdomain kintone.com/k/v1 records.json. And then we're going to be adding people's country, city, and state. But we're only going to be adding one user's country, city, state at a time. So we have the add record with no S on it, record.json, right? That's all. And yeah. So now we're going to be coding out in Express. So let's make a get endpoint for our Express backend. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to type in app.get, right? And this is how Express wants you to name and make your routes. So, and if you hover over it, you can kind of see right here, app.get, it needs a name for the route, which is a string. Okay, so we're going to type in here, and our first one's going to be called get data, is what we're going to call this, right? And our next one is we need to basically specify our cores is going to be our cores options, right? And we're going to make this an async route, and it's going to have a response and a request and a response, right? That's usually what all API routes do. Like I'm requesting something and then I'm getting some kind of response back. And then when you get that request and response, it's a function, right? You can see that function arrow. When you get a request on get data, respond with blah, 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 right? It's inside of a function. It's going to do whatever we tell it to inside of here. If I am moving too fast for you, you can see here we have in the docs folder, by the way, everything that I'm talking about if you want to check out. And we actually have the whole solution right here in server.js as well. If you want to skip ahead and see that, you can see right here we have like the kind of coded out, we have the coded out part. And I already missed one part right here with cores, so I'm going to fix that real quick. Our cores is equal to cores options, my bad. And now I'm going to double check because I got nervous. Yeah, okay, we're good. So on the get route, when people come to /get data, right? So like if I make a fetch request to local, what is it? Local host, and then we're running our background on 50,000 /get data. It's not /50,000. It's :50,000 /get data. We're going to do whatever is inside of these brackets right here, right? So the first thing that we're going to do is, well, when someone wants to get data, they don't need to like do anything, right? They just want data back. They're not going to give us like, hey, this data or that data. It's just get all data for now. So what we're going to do is we're just going to make a normal fetch request. So let's start doing that right off the bat. I have here my, I'm going to call my fetch options is equal to, and this is just going to be normal, kind of like fetch request headers and stuff like that. So I'm going to copy and paste this in here in the interest of time. But basically it's fetch, it's options, right? And I called it fetch options. You have a method. This is a get request, right? And we're on a get route. We're going to get data from a Kintone database. So we're going to make a get request. And for Kintone, how you specify your API token is here, X Saibozu API token in the headers. For Firebase, it might be like, Firebase token, or, for Azure, they might have you like put it in a different part of the headers, but for Saibozu or for Kintone, it is X Saibozu API token. I know it's long, is equal to our API token from our .env right up above. Okay, and then we're going to say const our records is equal to await, right? We want to async, this is an async function. We're going to await for our records to go. We're going to get all of our records. We're going to get multiple records, right? Every single user's country, city, and state. So we're going to do the multiple records endpoint, and it's going to have these options that we made above. And this pattern right here of doing blah, blah, blah is equal to await fetch, and then the URL, and then the options. This is very, very common. So when you're doing hackathon projects in the future, like hitting up APIs, like the weather.com API or whatever like that, this is how you make a fetch request these days. You don't need to use like Axios or other libraries. It's all included in Node.js these days. Just use fetch. Any tutorials that you see that are using Axios or other libraries to make API requests are probably kind of old, just so you know. All right, so our data actually going to come back to us in JSON. If we look at the documentation here, we say get records. What's going to come back? If I scroll down, this is a sample response, and it's going to come back in JSON, right? So we're going to parse that JSON. This is also just normal fetch request stuff. So our JSON response is going to be equal to await records.json, right? And then the last thing that we're going to do, and this part is very unique to Express, is when you return something from your function, right? Because this is a function, this route, right? Normally you'd write like return, blah, 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 right? That's what we all learned. Express does it a little bit weird. We actually designated up here that we have a request, right? A request saying like, hey, get this data or save this data, right? Well, we're not actually using the request for this route. We're going to be using it down below, but we also designated a response, right? And a response is not something that you normally put in the function parameters, right? Normally you put what you're passing into the function up here, but for Express, they want you to have this response up here in the function parameters. So do be careful of that. And so we'll say response JSON, I think is how you write that, is just going to be equal to our JSON response, and that's all we need to do to make a get route. I'm going to double check right here just to make sure I did everything. Yep, that's fine. And so actually, if you go to our second terminal, right? So we have React running in our first terminal on localhost 3000. And in the backend, after you did npm install, if you do npm run start, you start up our Express server here. You will see that we're running on localhost 50,000 / get data. Well, let's try that out. We have our app running here on localhost 3000. So I go there. Here's my app. And I do have some data in my database, right? If I click on get, oh, Texas, Dallas, there we go. We have just made a successful GET request from a web database, everybody. That's exciting, right? I love it when it works on the first try. I am excited. Sometimes, I always forget to type something and it doesn't work out, right? So in our last 5 minutes or so right here, we're going to do the put request. We're going to save, or no, the post request. We're going to save some data into our database, and then I'll take some questions, and you can ask me about anything really, about like getting a coding job or life in Japan, I guess. I don't know. So let's code that out right now. So we're going to make now a post endpoint in Express, right? And it's going to look very, very similar, although this time we're telling our Express backend to tell our Kintone database, hey, you need to save this data. And so it's going to look a little bit different, right? So we're going to do app.post. We're making a post request, right? That's REST API lingo for basically save something, right? And so we're going to make our endpoint at post data. Like before, we're going to have cores. It's going to accept requests coming from localhost 3000, which we set up above, cores options. This is going to be async as well. It is nice that it allows us to do async functions right here. It's going to have a request, a response, big fat arrow. In these parentheses, please do XYZ, right? And so this time, we're also going to have our fetch options, just like here. So I'm going to copy those from up above. But we're going to have one more part of our options, and that is going to be called the body, right? And the request body is an important part of any kind of put request, right? Because you need to tell people like, hey, I want you to save XYZ, right? And you need to tell them like what that data is. Otherwise, how are they going to save it, right? So if you go down here, right here, right? It's in body. Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. I also need to put content type, sorry. And it's going to be equal to JSON, application / JSON. I'm just going to copy that right here. I'm being a little bit lazy, guys, sorry. There you go. There you go. Also, there was a dash between content types, so that would have been a miss right there. If you're just new to the coding world, it's okay to make little misses like that all the time. I'm going to call this our request body is what this is going to be equal to. And it's going to give us a red line because we haven't told our app right. I have a question. When we say app.get, do we need to specify in the headers that is a GET request again? Yes, we do, because our React front end is actually making a GET request to our Express backend, right? So here's GET, and then our Express backend, this fetch request is actually making another GET request via this fetch request to our database, right? There's 3 parts in the chain. So yes, you do need to write both. Right? There's actually 2 GET requests happening here. One from React to your backend, and then one from your backend to the database. So we're going to have const request. Oops, I pushed tab. What's that? Get rid of that. Const request body is going to be equal to this body right here. And we are running a little bit short on time, so I'm actually going to kind of copy this, but you can find this in our data and our documentation as well. There we go. So the way that you structure a post request in Kintone as well is right here in our documentation and the add records. It tells you like, hey, the first thing that you need to do is tell us what database you're saving to, okay? Then in that database records, you have a bunch of different fields. So here it says text, but maybe it's country, for example, right? And that has a value of United States. And the next one is state, and that has a value of, Texas, for example. So that's how you need to structure your body this time. This is just directly from our documentation, right? So our app ID, this is from our .env file. This is coming from our React front end. So if you actually go into the React folder and you check out requests, this is how it is making the request right over here. Hold on just a second. So you can see up here, like, and actually, if you really want to know, this is where our first GET request or whatever, right, or our post request is coming from our React side, right? Just like your question, your Alexi. Our endpoint right here is localhost 50,000 / post data or get data, and we're giving it this like location of country, state, and city from a front end, and the method is post or get, right? And that's why on our server.js we also need to say like app.get, app.post, right? You can definitely check that out if you want to. We're going to stringify this body because I forgot to stringify it. So json.stringify. I think that's how you do that. It's been a while. Yeah, it's all caps. There you go. All right. So here, basically, we have our request body. We're telling Kintone, and this is a Kintone specific thing. It'll be different for Firebase or other databases if you use those. Hey, the country has a value of country. The state has a value of country. You can't forget value, right? The value part is very important. And then we have in our options, and this part is very generic. This is for just fetch requests. Fetch options. This time we're actually making a post request, so don't forget to change that. I just copied it like a dum-dum, so it's actually post. We have our API token. When you make post requests, you usually have to tell people like what kind of data you're trying to save. So this time we're trying to save some application/JSON data. Normally it's going to be this. If you're sending files, it might be like multi-part or something like that. You definitely have to check that out. But we're just sending text data. And that data is going to be right here in the body. It's going to be equal to JSON stringify request body. So it's going to be stringifying this variable that we made up here. All right, and the rest is going to be extremely similar to up above. Const response is going to be equal to, we're going to await a fetch request to our database. It's going to be the single record endpoint. This time we're only saving one user's country, state, and city. And we have our fetch options right up there. Our JSON response is going to be equal to await response dot JSON. and then we're going to return with res right here, right? That's how we did it up above. res.json. Ooh, don't do that. res.json is going to be equal to our JSON response. And I think everything here should be working. So whenever you're working with Express, you always need to stop the server and then restart it when you make a change. And let's go back to our app. You can see here in our web database, we only have one thing in it, right? United States, Texas, Dallas. Well, let's go ahead and add. And the first person to tell me a country, state, and city in the chat will get theirs added to my wonderful database while I take a drink of water. Although in the interest of time, I'm not going to wait more than 30 seconds. So I don't know how long the chat delay is over there. Cameroon. Sure. State. Where in Cameroon? Center. All right. City. I appreciate this, by the way. It's kind of interesting. Yaoundé. Hey, there it is. Very, very cool. All right, let's save that into our database. Click the submit button, spin, spin, spin. You'll notice that we don't have like a success or anything like that. But if we go back to our database, you can see that has been saved into the database. Congratulations. You made history. So we now have a fully working React front end, and we have just created our own API. Actually, what you have done today is actually very, very advanced web dev, and you should be proud of yourself. We just made our own backend that has a GET request route and a POST request route, right? And that's saving to a web database. That web database, which was super easy to make, by the way, right? Can you use the Toast library for success? You know what? I'm going to do you one better. Since we have 2 minutes, let's do a little bit of speed live coding. All right, how about that? This is all extra, by the way. So if I fail, I take no responsibility. We're going to go up here to React Confetti. Sure. React Confetti. And you can feel free to please, build off of this workshop. It's totally okay for you to do that. And we'll be finishing in 2 minutes, and then I'll have Sid walk me off. All right, so there we go. We have our React Confetti, and you use it. You import Confetti from React Confetti. Let's see if I can jam this into our front end real quick, okay? So I'm going to import Confetti from React Confetti, and then when I submit, and then else let response equal await postcard response console log response. Okay, and then we'll make a new hook right here, right? So we'll do this const confetti and set confetti. Come on, I have 1 minute left. Let's go, 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 go. We'll do set confetti to be equal to true right here. And then how do I add that div in? There it is, confetti. I'm going. We have, oh no, it's 12:30. I'm out of time. It's all right. Here's a common coding practice, by the way. You can use brackets right here. What is it? Confetti. And then you do this or no, or just nothing. There we go. That should work. If this doesn't work, then we'll just cut this from the video afterwards. This project is on GitHub. We have all of our projects on GitHub. And we have a bunch of cool videos like this actually on the Kintone.dev YouTube as well. So you can definitely check those out. Everyone, I'm going to check out my YouTube right here. Kintone.dev. Right. So definitely if Sid could post this. Oops, who's that person talking? Blah, blah, blah. Anyways, let's test out my speed coding here and see see if this worked out, right? So one more time, I'm going to do United States. I also used to live in Wisconsin, and that was Milwaukee, not the smart place. Submit. Hey, confetti. Isn't React fun? That's the fun part about React, right? Is that you can just like slap together slap together web projects in like 5 seconds. Say, all right, that's great. You got your wish. We have success, right? Yeah, that was fun. So today we actually kind of, you did a lot actually, and so definitely go over this content. And even if you don't use Kintone, although remember it was super fast, right? And it's a pretty good service in my opinion, and it's free. Um, you know, the concepts that you learned today about making fetch requests, right, and avoiding CORS errors and using a backend are very, very universal, and I hope that they help in all of your hackathons that you guys are going to be challenging from here on out. And yeah, I wish you the best of luck. I'm going to step aside now and let Sid take me off.
That was so much fun. Thank you so much for answering all of those questions, walking people through how to set up Kintone, building a hack out of that, and also taking up that last minute suggestion. And we love confetti. Let me tell you that as a community here, we love confetti.
Yeah. It's fun, right? I actually had to do the confetti for another workshop. So if you check us out on YouTube, we have all kinds of coding stuff, and like yeah, they use Kintone, but there's a lot of like JavaScript coding basics nestled in there, and it's a good way to practice if you want to. Everybody.
Of course. And if everybody in the chat or anybody in the chat joined a little later, I would just want to use this time to remind you of the month long hackathon that we're running and this session being part of that, wherein there's also a Kintone track prize. So you get to actually use this code that Sean linked you to, go ahead and build on top of that, and then be eligible for a track prize. And I'm going to drop that link here in the chat if you have not checked it out yet. But again,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Sean, for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to have you here,
Yeah.
and everyone in the chat too for
Yeah.
tagging
Yeah.
along with someone and making things happen. And
If
that's the
we're
best.
yeah, if we're all out of time, then that's cool too. If anybody has any questions or anything like that, I'm not doing anything. It's
Of course, we can just hang around for 10 seconds if
yeah,
that's
yeah,
okay, and then wait for questions.
yeah. Just questions about like you can even ask about like getting a coding job in the future, or like things that helped you to learn, or like what technologies you're interested in, stuff like that. It's always fun. If you guys have to move on to the next thing, then that's okay too. I'll
While
just
we're
go.
waiting for questions to pop in, I have a question in mind, which is we've seen a lot of advancements in technology, be it AI, be it or everything that's happening with development on the whole, right? Is there something specific that you've been interested in or something specific that you've been reading about lately?
Yeah, I think that I don't know, the conversion is going to happen soon where there's been like certain technologies that have been like incredibly popular for like about a year and then they kind of died off, right? So like back in like 2015, it was all about IoT, right? Internet of Things, like
Mhm.
toasters that are connected to the internet and stuff, right? And like sensors. And then after that came blockchain stuff, right? Everyone's really interested in blockchain. And then after blockchain came NFTs, right? Which is kind of part of blockchain. And then after NFTs came AI, right? And I think that those three or four technologies are going to combine together to make kind of like the future of the web. Um, and I think that they all kind of need each other. Actually, I could go on for a long time about this, but like AI is so powerful, but it's like useless without real world data, right? But the way to get real world data is from IoT and like sensors and stuff, right? Like you actually need some kind of sensor out there in the wild, like measuring weather data for the AI to actually like parse through, right? And then blockchain is useful for originally, right? Kind of like verifying data and making sure that this data is unchanged, right? And you can go back and check that it's unchanged. And so I think that there's going to be some kind of interesting combination of those three things in the future.
That sounds interesting. And I'm pretty sure this can be a conversation that we can have later about data originating and then going towards a place where you can have some
Yeah.
transparency, mutability, and all of that, and then training it to make models that can learn and all of that. Sounds exciting. But
Yeah.
while I
Yeah.
was some time,
Yeah.
I have another question here that I would want to bring your attention to, which is how do you approach a recruiter? How do you get hired?
Yeah. So the way that I went about it is, you need to have your GitHub and you need to have like projects that you've done by yourself, right? Not like school projects, because you can usually tell. But you need to be able to not just talk about like the technical parts, because usually the recruiter and HR like doesn't know what you're talking about, right? So you need to be able to kind of like nicely and clearly explain like what this does and why it's what you learned from it in a HR friendly way, right? That's
Sure.
that's what really took me, because like my first job interview, I was like, yeah, this is a full stack React app, it has blah 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 like that, and it has data token verification and blah 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 blah, and like she was like staring at me. um, so don't get too techy, right? Save that for an interview where you have a developer or someone in there, right?
Another quick question here about how do you stand out of the crowd? How do you make sure you aren't another, just another developer in a pool of applicants?
It's rough, right? There's Any job will have a lot of applicants, and a lot of those applications will be AI created as well,
Mhm.
right? And it'll be AI like also striking down most of those applicants. The way that I did it though is I would always write specifically about the company that I'm applying to. So when I was applying to Cybos, the first thing that I did, was after I knew about them and I knew a little bit about the product, I never used it. So like I looked for a way to see if like I could use their product. Right. And then I was like, okay, Kintone. And then like I started clicking around in it and I was like, okay, I know this, blah, 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 blah. And then I started talking about, like I have used Kintone before to do this and I like it and I want to work for you, And I think that if I see anybody that says like I've used your product, I immediately put them at the top of the stack. Anyways, so
Yes, that makes sense. There's also someone here who believes all the things that we've been talking about may end up being Web 5. How about that?
yeah, Web five. Yeah,
um,
you can call it Web five. You can. That's your name now. You can have that.
um,
Let's see. From the money point of view, I mean, web dev and junior dev is going to, face of, for the short term, a supply glut, right? We're going to have a lot of people who are trying to get into, web dev because it's really, really easy. One thing that I don't see a lot of people push is data visualization. And data visualization is often a very, very lucrative part of web development, because you're the one that takes boring sales data and makes it look pretty and builds cool dashboards and stuff like that everybody uses. And that usually is like a niche that makes money but still uses basic web dev skills, right? If you want to, ride the trend of AI, then yeah, I mean, go for it. It's we're not an AI company. We don't have the words AI on our homepage, even though competitors do. um, we didn't change what we did all of a sudden. So I can't speak to like hiring AI people because we don't do AI.
that makes sense. And I think that's all the questions we have. We're also on time, looks
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it. But
that's
thank you
fine.
again, all of you, for being here, for
Yeah,
keeping
yeah.
Sean engaged on this stream and asking questions, keeping Sean
I,
occupied all throughout the session. And thank you so much, Sean, for taking out time. I know it's pretty late for you. I do not want you to be here for more than this time. I know I need you to go get sleep now. But
it's
thank you so much. We hope to see you.
part of living in Japan is funny time zone stuff. Yeah, no, I wish everyone luck, and I hope you all do really well and go create some cool stuff. It'll be fun.
Thank you, everyone. We have several more streams coming up this weekend, and I hope to